You wake up every morning, scroll through the endless parade of notifications, watch other people succeed in silence, and feel the subtle weight of a question you dare not speak aloud. Why am I always one step behind? Most of us assume wealth, influence, and control arrive through visible effort. The hours you spend hustling, the degrees you earn, the promotions you chase. This is the trap, because the real architecture of power, the invisible currents that decide who rises and who stagnates, operates silently, quietly, beneath the surface. And no one teaches it. Not in school, not in your social circles, not even on glossy business magazines. Think about physics for a moment. The human mind is like a pendulum. It swings between fear and ambition, desire and hesitation, action and inaction. But the pendulum is not free. It is tethered to invisible strings, habits, decisions, small daily choices you don't even notice. These strings determine acceleration, momentum, and eventual velocity. The irony is staggering. The people who seem to luck out are not lucky at all. They are simply aligned with forces you cannot see. And until you understand those forces, you are always playing catch-up. Now, consider your own finances, your career trajectory, your social influence. What if the problem is not that you're lazy, that you lack intelligence, or that opportunity is scarce? What if the real reason lies in microscopic daily actions, repeated so consistently they shape your outcomes in ways you cannot observe, but the results are unmistakable? This is the invisible power most people ignore. It is quiet, uncelebrated, and almost imperceptible. Yet it dictates whether you remain ordinary or ascend. Most advice focuses on the surface. Save more, invest early, network harder. But this is noise. The real question is not what you do, but how you structure the invisible mechanisms of your life to channel energy, attention, and capital in precise ways that compound silently over time. Like the way water carves a canyon, not with speed or spectacle, but with relentless persistence. This changes everything. By the end of this video, you will understand not just habits, but the architecture that makes a habit powerful, invisible, and unstoppable. You will see the hidden behavioral forces that manipulate your spending, your attention, and your ambition. You will witness the silent traps engineered by modern society that keep most people tethered to mediocrity, while a few move forward undetected. And most importantly, you will discover the 4 daily habits that can put you in control of these forces. Habits that the wealthy, the influential, and the quietly powerful already practice every single day. But there's a twist. The first habit is deceptively simple. So simple, in fact, that most people dismiss it immediately. Yet ignoring it is a silent financial crime against your future self. A crime that compounds faster than any interest rate or stock market gain. By the time you understand why this habit works, you will have glimpsed the invisible machinery of your life, the system that has been operating without your consent since the moment you began making financial decisions. And once you see it, nothing will feel the same. Here's what you need to know. This is not a quick fix strategy. This is a structural shift. A transformation of daily rituals into power engines. The habits we will explore are small, silent, and almost invisible. But they are capable of producing enormous outcomes when executed consistently. And the most shocking part, they require no extraordinary talent, no insider knowledge, no inheritance, just precise alignment with the invisible systems that govern wealth, influence, and freedom. So, if you are ready to stop chasing what everyone else celebrates and start mastering what nobody notices, if you are ready to discover how to move your life quietly, deliberately, and invisibly toward power, then pay attention. Because once you understand these 4 daily habits, what you will see every decision, every dollar, every minute of your day in a completely new way. And the first habit, the one that almost everyone ignores, will be revealed in the very next section. It is deceptively small, almost laughable in its simplicity. But it is the invisible lever that shifts everything. The world you see, the one filled with salaries, investments, promotions, and flashy acquisitions, is a shadow. It's a projection of an underlying structure most people never notice. Imagine a skyscraper. You admire the glass facade, the gleaming lobby, the elevators that take people to penthouse offices. But the real story is underground. The foundation, the pilings driven deep into bedrock, the invisible supports that hold everything upright. Your financial life is no different. The habits, routines, and mental frameworks you practice daily form the foundation. Neglect them, and no amount of effort on the surface will save you. Here's a secret. Most financial guides won't tell you. The foundation of invisible power is not money. It is control over your daily system, control over attention, choices, and time, control over how your mind reacts to opportunity and friction. Think of it like a software operating in the background of your brain, executing code you didn't even realize was running. Every late-night impulse purchase, every decision postponed, every reactive moment adds clutter to this system, slowing down the compounding engine of your life. This is why some intelligent, hard-working people never seem to move forward. They're systematically bleeding power through small, invisible leaks. The first cognitive shift is to stop evaluating your success by outcomes alone. Outcomes are lagging indicators. The real metric is system integrity, the consistency and alignment of your daily rituals with long-term structural power. Imagine two people, each earning $100,000 per year. One spends aimlessly, reacts emotionally, and makes decisions based on status signals from peers. The other performs a few precise daily habits, invisible to anyone else, that optimize attention, decision-making, and leverage. 10 years later, the second person has financial freedom. The first is trapped in a cycle of stress, debt, and missed opportunity. It is not talent or luck. It is invisible architecture. Now, most people feel shame when they notice their lack of progress. They blame themselves, believing they are not disciplined enough, not smart enough, or not lucky. That shame is exactly what keeps them tethered to mediocrity. The truth is far more liberating. It is the system, not you, that has been working against you. Once you see the structural mechanics, shame disappears. You can finally operate with clarity, understanding that what you need is not brute effort, but structural alignment. At the core of this invisible architecture is the principle of compound small actions. Think of each daily habit as a micro-engine. Individually, these engines barely move the needle. Collectively, running silently in parallel over months and years, they create unstoppable momentum. The reason they feel invisible is that results lag, like planting seeds that take months to sprout. Most people abandon them too soon, mistaking the absence of immediate reward for failure. But when aligned correctly, these habits function like an invisible compounding force, producing wealth, influence, and freedom without fanfare. And here is the first micro-lever, the one almost nobody recognizes: intentional time structuring. It is not about waking up early or working more hours. It is about allocating mental energy and attention to the highest leverage zones in your life before external noise enters your system. Most people leave this to chance. Social media, urgent emails, and reactive decisions hijack their mornings, hijack their clarity, and fragment their attention. But those who control this habit, even in small ways, activate the first domino in the invisible chain of power. Consider this: a single hour of focused, intentional work at the right time of day compounds far faster than 10 hours scattered across distractions. Yet most people treat time as infinite, as if each hour carries the same weight. This is a structural misunderstanding. Time, when aligned with attention and leverage, becomes the fuel of invisible power. And mastering it is deceptively simple, but almost everyone ignores it. This is where the structure reveals itself. And now, the subtle danger. Even once you understand this, execution is fragile. It requires guarding your system against emotional hijacks, environmental noise, and self-deception. The moment you slip back into reactive behavior, the invisible architecture begins to erode. Habits lose compounding force. Opportunities pass unnoticed. And the gap between you and those who mastered the system quietly widens. Then by the next section, we'll dive deeper into the behavioral finance traps that actively fight against this alignment, even if you're intelligent, disciplined, or motivated. You will see how your emotions, identity, and social illusions have been subtly sabotaging your power, and why understanding these traps is crucial to make the first habit actually stick. To understand invisible power, you must also understand system fragility. Imagine a high-end watch, perfectly engineered. It can keep time accurately for decades, but only if every gear functions harmoniously. A single misalignment, a single overlooked cog, and the entire mechanism falters. Your daily life is the same. One misaligned habit, one moment of indulgence in distraction, one surrender to social pressure, and the compounding effect of your intentional actions diminishes. This is why surface-level advice fails. Save more. Exercise daily. Read books are instructions without structural context. They do not account for the invisible rules that govern how habits compound or collapse. The moment you understand that the system, not sheer willpower, creates results, shame transforms into clarity. You realize that power is not earned by brute effort. It is engineered through deliberate habit architecture. Here's a practical framework. Identify high-leverage zones, time blocks, decision points, and mental energy reserves that disproportionately impact long-term outcomes. Remove micro-frictions. Any activity that drains attention or energy without long-term benefit is silently eroding your power. Protect execution windows. Create invisible boundaries around these high-leverage moments. Morning routines, focused work sessions, strategic reflection, compound habits silently. Allow small, consistent actions to stack over months, generating momentum that remains invisible to others. This is invisible power. It is quiet. It is uncelebrated. And it is unstoppable when executed with discipline and structure. Yet here is the paradox. Understanding is not enough. Knowledge of these systems creates tension. It creates awareness of past misalignments, past wasted hours, and missed opportunities. That tension is necessary. It is the friction that signals growth. The challenge is not knowing what to do. It is consistently doing it, despite the inertia of years spent in chaos. And the first habit, intentional time structuring, will only produce invisible power when paired with a second layer, like a psychological alignment that most people never master: mental clarity and decision minimalism. This is where most intelligence and ambition fail. Without this layer, you're simply moving faster on a shaky foundation. The next section will reveal these behavioral traps in detail, exposing how emotional spending, identity illusions, and social signaling actively sabotage your invisible power. And you will begin to see why knowing the first habit is only the starting point, not the destination. Most people think financial failure is a result of laziness or lack of intelligence. This is false. The real enemy is invisible. It is woven into your psychology, your environment, and your daily choices. Behavioral economists call it cognitive friction, the subtle tension between what you know you should do and what you actually do. It manifests in emotional spending, reactive decision-making, and status-driven behavior. And it is not accidental. Society is structured to keep you in this cycle. Take emotional spending. We are trained to associate consumption with identity. A new gadget, a luxury item, or even a treat-yourself purchase temporarily signals success to our brains. Dopamine surges. Anxiety dissipates. Momentarily. But every transaction is a hidden leak of invisible power. These micro-choices, repeated daily, slowly erode your ability to build compounding advantage. Think of it as invisible friction in a financial engine. $1 here, one unnecessary purchase there. Over years, it accumulates into thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands lost to misaligned desire. Now consider the identity trap. Many people make financial decisions not based on logic or opportunity, but on who they believe they are, or who they think others perceive them to be. The successful person buys the luxury car, the expensive watch, the apartment with the skyline view. But identity is malleable, not fixed. If you define yourself by external validation, every decision becomes a social performance. You spend to impress, invest to signal, and chase status symbols that create the illusion of progress. This is why so many high-earning individuals remain financially insecure. They are building a house of social smoke, invisible to anyone but themselves. And then there is status inflation, a subtle but lethal trap. Every increase in income triggers a rise in lifestyle expenditure. The first $10,000 raises your standard of living, the next $20,000. Another adjustment. The result? Income rises, but your freedom does not. You're running faster, but the finish line keeps moving. Intelligent people fall victim to this more than most because they can rationalize every expenditure. They do not see the cumulative effect, the invisible drain on their financial foundation. These traps are amplified by social conditioning. We are biologically wired to compare ourselves with others. We observe what our peers do, how they dress, where they live, and unconsciously mimic behaviors to signal belonging. Even when we understand the trap intellectually, the pull of social alignment is powerful. The brain treats deviation as risk. To break free requires a conscious system, not a fleeting burst of willpower. And here is the hidden danger. Emotional spending, identity-driven purchases, and status illusions are self-reinforcing cycles. Each act temporarily reduces anxiety, but strengthens neural pathways that favor immediate gratification over compounding growth. Your habits become invisible chains. You think you are in control, but your system has quietly turned against you. Yet, awareness of these patterns is not the solution. It is the first step. The next step is structural intervention. Creating friction that prevents unconscious expenditure, aligning your identity with systems rather than objects, and building a framework where every decision compounds invisible power. By now, you should feel a subtle tension. You may recognize these traps in your own life. This tension is necessary. It signals that your invisible financial architecture has weaknesses. It sets the stage for the next revelation, the mathematical mechanics of compounding power. How small, consistent actions, shielded from behavioral sabotage, multiply over time. The following section will take you into numerical modeling, capital thresholds, and the velocity of wealth, exposing how visible effort alone cannot generate real invisible power. And we will show why mastery over these behavioral traps is the gateway to accelerating compounding advantage. Advantage invisible to most, but decisive for those who align their habits. Let's explore a concrete example. Two professionals, each earning $120,000 annually. Person A succumbs to identity and status traps, spending liberally on lifestyle upgrades with each raise. Person B, equally intelligent, implements systemized friction, automated savings, delayed gratification, and high-leverage spending decisions aligned with long-term goals. 10 years later, Person A appears successful on the surface. A large apartment, a luxury car. But their net worth is modest, burdened by debt and obligations. Person B, however, is quietly accumulating compounding assets, gaining invisible financial leverage that will eventually exceed Person A's visible lifestyle by multiples. The difference is behavioral alignment. Person A's brain is hijacked by immediate gratification. Person B's brain is engineered to serve the invisible system. This is why knowledge alone, attending seminars, reading books, following advice, is insufficient. Without aligning emotion, identity, and decision-making, any attempt at wealth accumulation is like pouring water into a leaky bucket. And here is the paradox that most people never confront. Your emotional wiring is not your enemy. It is exploitable. Social pressures, status comparisons, and habitual reactions are all predictable. Once you recognize the patterns, you can design daily systems to bypass them. The invisible power of your habits emerges not from suppressing desire, but from structuring the environment to channel impulses toward productive outcomes. Now imagine extending this framework beyond spending. Status-driven decisions affect risk-taking, networking, and opportunity evaluation. Someone who constantly seeks validation may avoid high-leverage opportunities for fear of judgment. Someone emotionally reactive may sell investments during market dips, losing compounding growth. In every case, invisible power is siphoned away by psychological misalignment. This is where most advice fails. It treats wealth as a linear equation: earn more, spend less, invest wisely, without accounting for behavioral entropy. Entropy, in this context, is the invisible decay caused by emotional misfires, social mimicry, and identity misalignment. To build real invisible power, you must neutralize entropy at its source. By the next section, we will quantify this effect. You will see the compounding frameworks, capital thresholds, and wealth velocity models that make invisible power measurable and actionable. You will witness how mastery over these behavioral traps allows leverage to multiply, quietly, invisibly, and relentlessly. And we will reveal why timing and alignment are more important than raw income or effort. Let's strip away abstraction for a moment and enter the realm of numbers. The cold, yet unyielding language that reveals invisible power in stark relief. Most people underestimate this because they only see income as power. They think, if I earn more, I'll be wealthier. This is a fallacy. Income alone does not create invisible power. What does is compounding leverage, the strategic accumulation and deployment of capital over time, magnified by behavioral alignment. Consider this. You save $1,000 per month, and you invest it with a conservative annual return of 7%. After 10 years, your balance grows to roughly $160,000. Not life-changing until you adjust the system. Add a second habit: reinvesting all returns instead of withdrawing, combined with increasing contributions as income rises. Suddenly, your 10-year total jumps past $250,000. Add tax efficiency, risk mitigation, and timing strategies, and the compounding velocity begins to accelerate exponentially. This is the first principle of wealth velocity: small, consistent actions, structured with compounding intent, multiply quietly but relentlessly. The math is unforgiving in its impartiality. Aligned actions compound, misaligned actions decay. Every micro-sabotage, emotional spending, lifestyle creep, delayed investment reduces your effective compounding rate. The result? Invisible power is lost without a trace, leaving you to wonder why your efforts never produced freedom. Capital thresholds play a hidden role here. Not all money behaves equally. $10,000 in an emergency fund serves as security, reducing reactive decision-making and emotional spending. $10,000 invested in growth assets is a momentum engine, producing returns that amplify over time. On $10,000 in depreciating consumption goods is invisible friction. It actively erodes potential. The difference between these thresholds may seem trivial in the short term, but over a decade, they create the chasm between silent power and visible struggle. And then comes velocity, the rate at which your compounding engine accelerates. Most people misjudge this because they focus on nominal income, not effective capital flow. Velocity is not about how much you earn, but how quickly and efficiently your capital converts into future options, opportunities, and leverage. A single dollar, if placed strategically, can unlock options 10 times its nominal value. Misplaced, it locks you into obligations that constrain mobility. The difference between ordinary accumulation and invisible power lies in understanding velocity, thresholds, and compounding alignment. Here's a simple model. Person A earns $100,000 per year, spends $70,000, saves $30,000 at 5% return. 10-year net worth, approximately $400,000. Person B earns the same, but applies behavioral discipline, optimizes compounding, and invests $40,000 at 7% return. 10-year net worth, approximately $650,000. Person C implements systemized invisible power, aligns attention, compounds daily habits, reinvests all gains, and protects against behavioral entropy. 10-year net worth, $1,200,000 plus. The disparity is not due to intelligence or effort. It is structural execution, the invisible framework that amplifies small daily choices into enormous long-term outcomes. But here's the tension. Executing this model consistently is deceptively difficult. Without systemized habits, human behavior fights the very compounding you attempt to create. Where emotional impulses, reactive decisions, and social comparison erode momentum. Most people never notice the erosion. They only see the surface numbers and feel frustrated. This is why invisible power remains invisible. It is cumulative, subtle, and requires both psychological mastery and numerical discipline. By the next part, we will take this further, exploring escalation examples with numeric modeling, showing how strategic reinvestment, risk allocation, and timing windows create an exponential acceleration that ordinary earners rarely comprehend. And you will see why mastering these frameworks is essential to turn your first daily habit into a real, compounding engine of invisible power. Let's examine escalation with numbers. Imagine your monthly investment grows in stages, aligned with habit reinforcement and system optimization. The year 1 to 3. Foundation phase. $500 to $1,000 per month invested consistently. Returns grow steadily, but change is subtle. Invisible power is building quietly. Few notice, but compounding momentum is forming. Year 4 to 6. Velocity phase. Contributions increase, habits are reinforced, returns accelerate. What once seemed modest now begins to generate options. Opportunities to invest in higher leverage assets, side ventures, or skill acquisition. This is the tipping point where invisible power starts outpacing visible effort. Year 7 to 10. Exponential phase. Compounded capital begins generating additional capital. Interest on interest, options on options. By now, the system is largely self-reinforcing. Behavioral discipline, systemized habits, and attention alignment allow you to operate on a scale that outpaces peers without increasing visible effort. The mathematics here is simple but often overlooked. Linear income cannot compete with exponential compounding aligned with behavioral mastery. Even small incremental differences in early habits create vast discrepancies over time. This is why starting early, executing daily habits consistently, and shielding the system from emotional sabotage is more important than any windfall, bonus, or lucky investment. We can also model opportunity thresholds. With $100,000 invested strategically, one can access opportunities that require liquidity and credibility, real estate deals, private equity, or strategic partnerships. With $200,000, these opportunities expand. But without the invisible power of disciplined habit, even high nominal capital fails to unlock velocity. The system, not the amount, is decisive. The final element is decision sequencing. Invisible power compounds not only through capital, but through correctly timed choices. When habits, thresholds, and velocity align, one decision multiplies the impact of all previous ones. Miss the timing, and the same effort yields far less. This explains why intelligent people fail. It is rarely their skill or knowledge, but the invisible sequencing of action versus reaction that determines outcomes. By the end of this section, you should see a pattern emerging. Invisible power is a mathematical, psychological, and structural system. Daily habits are the smallest visible inputs. The compounding frameworks, capital thresholds, and velocity models are the engines. And behavioral mastery ensures the engine runs without friction. This is where ordinary effort transforms into extraordinary invisible influence, and where the next section begins. Why intelligent, capable people still fail, even when the math is clear. Intelligence is not immunity. Talent is not protection. Knowledge is not power. Most of the people you admire, the ones climbing the ladder, earning big salaries, appearing successful, are trapped in a subtle, invisible trap. It's the trap of environmental and psychological friction, a system designed not by malice, but by biology, social conditioning, and habitual misalignment. Consider lifestyle inflation. You earn more, so you spend more. You upgrade your apartment, your car, your dining habits. Your friends see your success, so you compete silently. Is trying to match their perceived achievements. The brain interprets every upgrade as a reward, every comparison as necessary calibration. This is why intelligent people fail. Their cognition is hijacked by social signaling, not systemized power accumulation. Every rational decision is counteracted by invisible behavioral entropy. Decision fatigue compounds the problem. Your brain can make only so many high-leverage choices before performance deteriorates. Every small, unnecessary decision. Should I buy this coffee? Which app should I open? Should I attend this meeting? Erodes the mental bandwidth available for high-leverage financial decisions. The more options, the more depletion. By the time opportunity appears, your system is tired, reactive, and prone to error. This is the invisible drain on power that few acknowledge. Here's another subtle danger: social programming. From childhood, we are trained to seek approval, follow scripts, and avoid risk. The consequences of deviation, shame, isolation, judgment, are powerful conditioning forces. As adults, even when we intellectually understand compounding, leverage, and financial alignment, social programming nudges us back into familiar patterns. It's why so many ambitious people chase prestige over progress, recognition over real, invisible power. And then there is the illusion of intelligence as protection. Many smart individuals assume that because they understand money, they are immune to common mistakes. But intelligence without structural systems is like a race car with no brakes. Speed is useless if you cannot control direction. Emotional triggers, social cues, and decision overload create invisible friction that sabotages results, even when you know better. The tragedy is that these forces are invisible until you experience them. You feel the weight of stagnant progress despite your effort. You see peers surpassing you, not realizing they are operating with invisible compounding habits. This is why many capable individuals feel trapped, frustrated, or chronically behind. They are victims not of luck, but of systemic erosion they cannot see. Now let's layer in another dimension: environmental pressure. The people, spaces, and routines around you dictate behavior far more than any conscious decision. Office culture, friend groups, social media feeds. These subtly shape your consumption patterns, investment behavior, and perception of success. Even when you understand invisible power, was exposure to reactive environments constantly tests your discipline. This is why intelligent people fail. The system fights back. Habits decay under pressure, and compounding potential leaks through friction you never notice. Lifestyle inflation adds weight to this environment. The more you earn, the more peers, products, and experiences demand attention and resources. Social comparison is relentless. The wealthy rarely flaunt every strategic move. They operate quietly. But those without invisible alignment are ensnared in the pressure to display success. Every dollar spent on signaling rather than leverage reduces velocity, eroding invisible compounding. Decision fatigue, as we discussed, compounds these pressures. It is not simply being tired. It is a cognitive tax that diminishes executive function, reduces delayed gratification, and amplifies emotional triggers. Your system's integrity, the invisible architecture of your daily habits, is under constant attack. One misaligned evening, one reactive purchase, one surrender to social pressure, and months of invisible compounding are partially undone. Yet there is hope. Awareness of these pressures is the first lever of control. Recognizing lifestyle inflation, environmental conditioning, and decision fatigue allows you to design countermeasures, buffer zones for high-leverage decisions, habit scaffolds to reduce reactive impulses, and selective exposure to environments that reinforce alignment rather than entropy. This is where structural power meets psychology. Intelligence alone cannot save you, but intelligent system design can. By the next section, we will shift focus from the psychological and environmental traps to the strategic wealth blueprint, a step-by-step, engineered plan that converts invisible habits, compounding behavior, and velocity principles into tangible assets, risk-managed capital, and long-term leverage. You will see how the foundation built by the first 4 sections is translated into actionable, structural wealth creation. Everything we've explored so far, the invisible power of daily habits, behavioral traps, compounding frameworks, velocity, and decision fatigue, culminates here. This is where knowledge becomes architecture, where insight becomes an engineered system. The strategic wealth blueprint is not a vague recommendation. It is a precise sequence of steps designed to transform invisible alignment into tangible capital, skill, and long-term leverage. Step 1. Capital allocation architecture. You cannot build invisible power without structured capital. Divide resources according to purpose, not emotion. Emergencies, growth, optionality, and leverage each require their own channels. The emergency fund is not just safety. It is psychological leverage, freeing your decision-making from reactive fear. Growth capital compounds silently, creating momentum that accelerates over time. Optionality funds provide freedom to seize opportunities invisible to reactive minds. Leverage capital, when used strategically, magnifies the engine, but abuse it, and the entire system collapses. Step 2. Asset acquisition logic. Assets are not just investments, they are decision multipliers. Real estate, businesses, intellectual property, and high-leverage skill investments act as engines of invisible power. The key is prioritization. Select assets that compound not only financially, but strategically, increasing optionality, credibility, and influence. Avoid consumption disguised as investment. The luxury car, the high-end electronics, the lifestyle upgrades. These assets produce only immediate satisfaction, no velocity. Step 3. Risk mitigation structure. Invisible power is fragile. Systems fail when risk is unmanaged. Insurance, diversification, hedging, and contingency planning are invisible supports that protect compounding momentum. The wealthy, the silent influencers, and the strategic investors never reveal these mechanisms. They are invisible, yet crucial. Risk mitigation is not fear. It is strategic intelligence. Step 4. Skill stacking model. The next layer is human capital. Was compounding financial advantage is accelerated by unique, high-leverage skills. Skills create outsized value relative to effort. But skill stacking is not random. It requires identifying areas where your talent intersects opportunity, systemizing learning, and layering abilities so that each additional skill multiplies the power of the previous one. Your daily habits fuel this stack, producing invisible momentum in the marketplace. Step 5. Cash flow architecture. Wealth is not measured by net worth alone, but by the velocity and predictability of cash flow. Silent power emerges when your income streams, active or passive, feed back into compounding capital rather than consumption. Every dollar reinvested, every skill monetized, every leverage window utilized adds invisible force to your system. So this is where the blueprint becomes kinetic, converting alignment into measurable impact. The challenge here is execution discipline. Knowledge of these steps without implementation is vanity. Each component, the allocation, the asset selection, the risk controls, the skill stacking, the cash flow, must operate in concert. The blueprint is invisible until it moves. Once operational, it converts small daily habits into systemic wealth, accelerating velocity, expanding thresholds, and creating leverage that ordinary effort cannot match. Step 6. Long-term asymmetry thinking. Invisible power thrives on strategic patience. Each component of the blueprint compounds over time, but only when viewed through a decadal lens. The wealthy do not think in months, they think in decades. They tolerate short-term discomfort for long-term alignment, allowing compounding velocity to multiply silently. Every decision is filtered through the lens of asymmetry, the ratio of effort today versus payoff tomorrow. Step 7. Feedback loops and system reinforcement. Invisible power is self-correcting. Track outcomes, analyze variance, and adjust the system without emotional bias. Minor misalignments should be corrected quietly. Catastrophic deviations prevented proactively. The blueprint functions as a living organism. Habits feed capital. Capital skills. Skills and opportunity compounds wealth. Each loop strengthens the invisible engine. Step 8. Integration of psychological mastery. Execution requires emotional calibration. Behavioral traps, decision fatigue, and social pressures are the enemies of compounding systems. The blueprint integrates invisible defenses, habit scaffolds, environmental alignment, cognitive buffers, and attention control mechanisms. Your daily rituals are the firewall protecting compounding momentum from decay. Step 9. Strategic sequencing. Not all actions are created equal. Timing amplifies or diminishes impact. Invisible power is realized when capital, habits, opportunity, and skill converge at precise moments. This sequencing is why seemingly small decisions, an extra hour of focus, a delayed purchase, an early investment, can generate disproportionate outcomes. It is leverage applied invisibly, silently, and consistently. Finally, Step 10. Scalability. The blueprint is not static. Invisible power is designed to scale. As capital, skills, and opportunities grow, the system absorbs the increase without collapsing. Each layer multiplies the next. Habits you implement. The intentional structuring of time, emotional alignment, and behavioral discipline become the bedrock of a compounding, self-reinforcing engine. By mastering these 10 layers, You convert invisible alignment into real-world influence, wealth, and freedom. The blueprint is no longer theoretical. It is operational. But understanding it is not enough. Execution requires the acceleration phase, where dual engines of income and assets are synchronized, optionality is amplified, and timing windows exploited. In the next section, we will unlock the mechanics of acceleration, showing how to transform the strategic wealth blueprint into kinetic, exponential growth that compounds silently and relentlessly. So acceleration is where invisible power transforms from a slow-burning engine into a high-velocity machine. Up to this point, you have built the foundation: daily habits, behavioral mastery, compounding frameworks, and the strategic wealth blueprint. But foundations alone do not produce exponential growth. They merely prevent decay. Acceleration requires dual engines: the synchronized deployment of income and assets to multiply leverage. The first engine is income. Income is not just cash, it is strategic bandwidth. How you earn, structure, and allocate it determines whether your compounding habits have fuel or sputter under scarcity. High leverage income is aligned with skills that produce outsized value relative to effort, allowing time and attention to remain free for high-impact compounding actions. Reactive, low-leverage work, even if lucrative, is a trap. It creates opportunity cost and erodes focus. The second engine is assets. Assets are not merely stores of value, they are multipliers. Financial instruments, intellectual property, businesses, and real estate generate options, credibility, and cash flow. The compounding of these assets does not happen magically. It requires strategic alignment with the first engine. Income without asset deployment stagnates. Assets without disciplined acquisition at the right thresholds remain dormant. The secret of acceleration lies in their synchronization. Optionality is the next critical lever. Invisible power thrives on flexibility within structure. Optionality is the ability to act when the system identifies asymmetric opportunities. This is not impulsive risk. It is controlled, pre-structured freedom. Cash reserves, knowledge, networks, and scalable skills create optionality, allowing you to seize opportunities invisible to those trapped in reactive cycles. Without it, even high compounding potential is limited by the timing and availability of decisions. Leverage is a double-edged sword. Properly applied, it amplifies every component of the strategic wealth blueprint. Misapplied, it destroys momentum faster than any market downturn or behavioral slip. The acceleration phase is not about reckless borrowing or blind speculation. It is about precision leverage. Every deployment must respect thresholds, risk appetite, and systemic alignment. Leverage amplifies velocity only when habits, capital, and psychology are synchronized. Finally, timing windows define whether acceleration succeeds or stalls. If the invisible system respects no calendar, it only multiplies when the right conditions align: capital availability, psychological readiness, skill competency, and opportunity convergence. Missing these windows is invisible sabotage. Recognizing and positioning for them is the hallmark of those who compound power silently and exponentially. By now, the tension should be palpable. You understand the mechanics, yet implementation is nuanced. One misaligned deployment, one rushed decision, one neglected habit can stall the entire system. This is why acceleration is a phase, not a single action. Let's break down a practical sequence for acceleration. Synchronize income with habits. Structure high-leverage work to maximize skill deployment and minimize reactive energy loss. Yet automate low-impact tasks to free attention for compounding engines. Deploy assets strategically. Prioritize investments that multiply velocity. Businesses, intellectual property, growth assets, while protecting against risk through diversification and hedging. Create optionality buffers. Maintain reserves of capital, knowledge, and social leverage. This allows action when high-return opportunities emerge, rather than being forced to react under pressure. Apply precision leverage. Borrow, invest, or scale only when thresholds, risk tolerance, and system alignment converge. Avoid emotional, impulsive, or status-driven deployment. Exploit timing windows, monitor capital, attention, and opportunity alignment. Enter and exit positions strategically, allowing compounding engines to accelerate without friction. Imagine a compound scenario. Engine 1, income, generates $10,000 per month with high leverage skills. Engine 2, assets, produces $3,000 per month through strategic investments. Optionality reserves allow rapid deployment into a high-return venture, producing an additional $2,000 per month. Precision leverage multiplies returns by 1.5 times due to systemized, risk-aligned borrowing. In 6 months, the total effective cash flow is not $15,000. It is closer to $25,000 due to compounding effects, timing alignment, and risk mitigation. Ordinary earners see only the $10,000 baseline. They miss the invisible multiplier. This is the engine of acceleration. Exponential outcomes arising from disciplined, synchronized systems. The invisible advantage is psychological as well as financial. As your systems accelerate, your confidence, attention, and decision bandwidth grow. You're no longer reacting to the world. You're shaping it. Most people never reach this phase because they never master habits, threshold alignment, or behavioral discipline. The few who do operate silently, multiplying power and freedom without spectacle. Next, we will explore identity evolution, where your psychological framework transforms to match this new velocity. Delayed gratification, strategic detachment, and decade-long thinking become second nature, ensuring the acceleration phase is sustainable rather than explosive and unsustainable. Acceleration without identity alignment is fragile. You can build compounding engines, synchronize income and assets, and exploit timing windows. But if your mind remains reactive, emotional, or short-term oriented, invisible power decays. The next phase is not financial. It is psychological. It is the evolution of your internal architecture to match the velocity you now command. The first step is delayed gratification rewiring. Most people are wired for immediate reward. A like on social media, a small indulgence, a reactive purchase. These stimuli hijack attention and disrupt compounding alignment. Invisible power demands patience. It requires training the mind to defer instant pleasure for exponentially greater outcomes in the future. This is not suffering. It is strategic alignment. Each decision to delay gratification is a micro-lever, silently multiplying momentum in every dimension of life. Next is strategic detachment. Emotional attachment to status, money, or recognition is a hidden anchor. It creates bias, impulsive choices, and friction against compounding power. Detachment is not apathy. It is clarity of focus. It allows you to act from system integrity rather than reaction, to seize opportunities without fear, and to avoid traps disguised as progress. The invisible advantage is that those around you continue to react emotionally, while you operate from a place of calm, calculated influence. Identity evolution also requires temporal recalibration. Ordinary minds operate in months, quarters, or years. Invisible power operates in decades. Every decision is filtered through long-term asymmetry, the ratio of immediate cost to future strategic advantage. The compounding effect of habits, asset allocation, and behavioral discipline is only visible when the time horizon is extended. By thinking in decades, you allow the system to reach exponential velocity before most people even notice. Why consider this? A $1,000 micro-habit repeated daily may feel insignificant. But when executed over 10 years, compounded through behavioral alignment and systemized deployment, It produces outcomes invisible to the casual observer. The identity that can sustain these decisions is no longer the reactive self, influenced by immediate reward. It is the architect self, calibrated for long-term structural power. The final element of identity evolution is psychological resilience against social entropy. As your invisible power grows, peers, colleagues, and social networks may perceive divergence. Your habits, decisions, and allocation of attention may seem alien or extreme. Without an evolved identity, social pressure erodes discipline. With it, you remain aligned, silently compounding leverage while others chase validation. Yet this evolution is not sudden. It is iterative. Daily habits act as identity scaffolds. Every intentional choice reinforces the archetype of the long-term strategist. Your internal narrative shifts from reaction to intentionality, from scarcity to compounding abundance, from short-term comparison to decade-long asymmetry. Habits that once felt trivial now operate as engines of silent influence. Finally, this phase unlocks a paradoxical freedom. The more your identity aligns with invisible power, the less reactive you are to external events, and the more agile your system becomes. Decisions once dictated by fear or social expectation are now filtered through clarity, timing, and leverage. Your internal architecture evolves to match the external velocity of your assets and income. By the next section, we will redefine wealth, freedom, and power, moving beyond income and consumption to a broader understanding of invisible influence. You will see how the evolved identity interacts with tangible and intangible resources to create freedom, autonomy, and structural advantage that the majority cannot perceive or replicate. Most people define wealth in the wrong terms. They measure it by salary, net worth, or lifestyle displays. Freedom is confused with leisure, and power is mistaken for visibility or influence over others. This is the trap. Invisible power teaches a different framework. Wealth is structural, freedom is operational, and power is strategic. Let's start with wealth. True wealth is not a number in your bank account. It is the capacity to act without friction. It is the alignment of capital, skills, and psychological resilience so that each choice multiplies options and velocity. A millionaire who lives paycheck to paycheck, emotionally reactive and socially tethered, is materially rich but structurally poor. Conversely, someone with modest nominal assets but disciplined invisible systems may operate with exponentially more leverage. Wealth is the engineering of freedom, not the accumulation of symbols. Freedom, in this framework, is not about escaping work or scheduling leisure. It is the ability to allocate your attention, energy, and time without compromise. The invisible power of freedom comes from systems that shield you from reactive pressures, financial entropy, and social distraction. When your daily habits, asset alignment, and identity evolution converge, freedom becomes the medium through which invisible power expresses itself. It is quiet, controlled, and uncelebrated, but decisive. Power is the final dimension. Most confuse it with dominance, recognition, or authority. Invisible power is strategic leverage. It manifests in options, timing, and influence without observation. It is the ability to act when opportunities arise, to shape outcomes silently, and to convert small inputs into disproportionate outcomes. Real power is invisible precisely because it does not require signaling. It compounds in the background, unnoticed, until it becomes unassailable. Consider the interaction between these three pillars. Wealth without freedom becomes a trap. Resources exist, but choice is constrained. Freedom without wealth lacks leverage. Options are empty without means. Power without structure is ephemeral. Impact fades as conditions shift. Invisible power is the integration of all three: wealth, freedom, and influence, aligned with habits, systems, and compounding frameworks. Redefining wealth also requires reframing identity. When you understand that power is invisible, freedom is systemic, and wealth is structural, your perception of success shifts. The desire for social approval, conspicuous consumption, and reactive decision-making fades. You no longer chase signals of status. You build engines of velocity. Each habit, investment, and skill becomes a lever, not a trophy. Finally, this redefinition exposes a profound opportunity. The majority remains trapped in conventional metrics: salary, net worth, likes, visibility. Those who adopt invisible frameworks gain a silent advantage. They operate with control, clarity, and compounding momentum, while the rest remain reactive, distracted, and constrained. Wealth, freedom, and power are no longer external. They are internalized, systemic, and self-reinforcing. By the next and final section, we will close with the Challenge plus Ascension Close, a strategic call to action that consolidates all the principles, ignites your internal architecture, and leaves you with one unforgettable directive for turning invisible power into reality. Everything you've seen, the invisible architecture of power, the compounding engines, the strategic wealth blueprint, and your evolved identity, was designed to reveal a truth most never confront. Your life is a system, and invisible mastery is its highest lever. Most will drift, reacting to impulses, social pressures, and fleeting gratification, never seeing the compounding potential slipping through their hands. But now, you know differently. Here is the challenge. Implement what you've learned relentlessly for 30 days without compromise. Structure your time with intention. Protect your decision-making bandwidth. Align your assets, income, and optionality for maximum velocity. Track every habit not as a chore, but as a lever in your invisible compounding engine. Every delayed gratification, every intentional action, every small alignment amplifies over time. Visualize your future self 10 years from now. The invisible systems you build today have multiplied. You operate with clarity, freedom, and leverage that your peers cannot perceive. Decisions that once seemed daunting are now effortless. Opportunities align silently around you. Your wealth is structural. Your freedom is operational. Your influence is strategic. The invisible power you wield today compounds into unstoppable momentum tomorrow. Do not wait for permission. Do not chase external validation. Your invisible power is yours to construct. Begin with one disciplined daily habit, then a second, then a third. Layer them, synchronize them, and allow the compounding engine to accelerate. This is your moment to shift from reactive existence to strategic influence. The rules you now know, the hidden levers, the psychological architecture, the compounding mechanics, are only valuable when executed. The question is no longer whether you understand them, but whether you will act. One final truth: invisible power does not announce itself. It grows quietly, relentlessly, and invisibly. By the time the world notices, your advantage is absolute, your velocity unstoppable, and your freedom undeniable. Start today. Build silently. Compete invisibly. Ascend relentlessly.